Hi everybody, welcome to the May 2015 Houston Clutter Coaching Meetup group. Say hi everybody.
Hi.
I love that part on the video. Tonight I'm going to talk about, come on in. Tonight I'm going to talk about lessons I have relearned being my own client. As many of you know, my mom passed away in December, and so as a result I'm right in the middle of dealing with my mother's estate. And as my clients have often said to me, the first year is the worst part, and I totally agree. It's been, aside from living with grief, which everybody does when this happens, I'm still trying to run my business, and so I'm struggling to do both of those well. It's not really, it's a chore for me right now. But my sister and I are also now having to process her home, my mother's home, and the contents, and get that house sold and get all the stuff out, and she's in North Carolina, so that is also on my plate, and it's been an extra burden. And I spent the first part of May, so I spent the first 11 days in May at my mom's house, sitting with my sister and going through and making, I want this, I want that, that goes to donate, that goes to trash decisions. Because I can't, she's having to be there, she's the executor, and she's having to be there to do the work, but I wanted to go and be helpful, and so I went for 11 days and did my process. And so the meetup has really come out of my experience of that 11-day trip, because I'm being my own client right now. And it's been a very interesting and surreal experience for me to be on this side of the game instead of my normal side of the game. So I just wanted to share some of my experience and hopefully give you guys some tips for when you're in the same situation as me, I guess. The first comment I want to make is that aside from the physical stuff, my mother had really handled her business. So there was a will, we found notes for planning a funeral, and it was really handwritten notes, like she hadn't gone to talk to the priest or written anything up. But it was, you could see that she'd been sitting in her chair making notes about she wanted this hymn here and she wanted that prayer there, and she'd been going down the list. And so she must have been working on it in the weeks before she died, which was really a huge help for us, so that we could plan and know that it was what she wanted. It's something that people don't think about, like the actual service. Like everybody thinks about, you got to have a niche, you got to pay for the things, all the processing about the body, but you don't think about the specific service itself. It was a real gift for us that she made some notes for us to follow so that we had something to do. We didn't have to think hard about it. That was really wonderful. She'd already purchased a niche. She'd been to the funeral home and scheduled paid for a plan. So all of those things that when somebody dies, you suddenly stand there and everybody looks at each other and they go, oh my God, is there a will? What are we going to do? Where's she going to go? When's the funeral? It was all handled. And that was a real blessing for us. It was a real help. Because you're in the worst possible time in your life. You're completely in a fog. Your mind has shut down in shock. And you don't have anything to make decisions with. And so that was a big help for us in the end. The lesson relearned. Preparing for others to come behind you and pick up the pieces is a gift that only you can give to your relatives. And it was a big blessing for me. The next thing that I want to say is my mother had been taking my advice for a long time, which was wonderful. She'd been going through her stuff since she moved to North Carolina 14 years ago. So she had been slowly going through all of the things that had moved. We had been through the garage 3 times in that process, and each time we had given things away, whittled it down, shredded old files, gotten stuff out of the garage. She'd been making a conscious effort all the time to go through and thin out. So as I was walking around at Christmas time in the house, opening cabinets, pulling out drawers, looking under the bed, everything had a general category at least. This drawer had gift wrap in it. This drawer had makeup in it. And I didn't find anything that was a bunch of documents to descramblize. It wasn't a bunch of house full of junk drawers, I guess is what I'm saying. And what that meant for us was, as Leisha and I went through these drawers, it was real easy to go, this is the makeup drawer. What we're doing with makeup is, it's all, we're throwing it out. Like, we can't give used makeup to somebody, so. And then we could make that decision about the whole drawer. Instead of finding makeup all over the house and making that decision over and over and over again, it was a real help that she had put in the effort. And the funny thing was that she considered herself disorganized. She laughed about, oh, I'm so disorganized, Gayle, I wish you were here to help me, blah, blah, yada. And every Christmas I would go and we would work on something in the house. And she would say, I wish you were here to help me all the time. And, you know, she acted like she didn't know what to do, but she did stuff anyway and made headway. And it was a huge help for us in going through the house. And my estimate after having gone through from front stem to stern basically was she probably saved us about 50% of the time because she had done so much work beforehand. And thank God. The next lesson is about being on the receiving end of emotional overwhelm. It's been real eye-opening for me. I do this for a living, but I found myself, as I was in her house trying to work, really not able to focus. And I make my living on being focused, right? I go into people's houses and I focus with you for 3 hours and we are on it and I am moving you along and I'm pulling you back from not being focused. And I do this all day long. And I could not focus for more than an hour and a half. And then I would have to get up and go someplace else, or I would break down and be crying, or it was so unnerving to realize that what I think of as my normal skill set, the stuff that I rely on to make a living and be my expertise, it was gone. I mean, it was just not available in its normal level. And I could summon it up for an hour, and then I would find something and it would make me cry. And it would all, you know, I'd be derailed. And so I ended up feeling like I had ADD. And I was pinging from room to room, and we would go halfway through it, and then my little sister would go, I can't deal with this, we gotta go. And we'd have to go into some other area. And so it was a good reminder for me about how derailed my clients are when I'm dealing with them from this point of view. I mean, I always knew it, but now I have a much stronger experience of my skill set has fled, and you should expect your skill set to flee. It's not going to be there when you are in this position to call on it. I presume that the less attached you are to that person, if this is your great aunt twice removed, you know, that is really, you didn't live close to her, you didn't have a relationship, maybe that will be less of an issue for you. But I suspect that anybody that you're going to be clearing out their space for them is somebody that you had some kind of previous relationship with. And so when you're in that position, what normally is helpful to you and what you normally rely on as being the stuff that makes you comfortable that you can execute is not going to be there for you. And that was a big surprise for me. I thought, this is how I can help my sister, this is how I can go. My sister is ADD, and she very much pings around normally anyway. She's constantly ping, 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 right? And I'm the one that can focus. And so I thought that would be, I went up there expecting to do my job at my mother's house and be helpful. And I was helpful, and I was able to use those skills, but probably at 50% of normal. And so that was a big eye-opener for me too, and a good reminder that when my clients are dealing with grief, they just don't have it. They just don't have it in them to be there for normal. And which is why I run circles around them all the time.
Your mom knocked the banner down.
She did?
She did.
My mother used to laugh about that. Ed, you gotta get the banner to stay up. So here's another lesson that keeps getting underlined for me. And this is the way that Ed phrased it. It's about your relationships versus the stuff. So Mom raised my sister and I to really value the relationships more than the stuff. And so as we've been going through the house and making our choices, I want this, I want that, when we got to the things that both of us wanted, one of us would immediately say, okay, you have it. We were able to make that compromise very quickly and let it go, because although it made me cry nonstop to be in my mother's house, I know that my mother's stuff is not my mother, right? And so winning all of the things that I might like in the house really doesn't get me anything other than, browbeating my sister. So we were very easily able to say, oh, you like that too? Okay, you take it, because we're both getting plenty of stuff out of the house. There's a whole third of it that's, going off to donation. And it was a good reminder that it's not the stuff. It's not the stuff. And that relationship is more important to maintain during this process. And I'm really grateful that we were able to do that. I hear horror stories about families getting all, about who's going to get the coffee table, and people are having big arguments about it. And I just want to throw in here, you're at your worst possible point. Everybody's acting badly. Everybody is emotional and over the top. And it does no one any good to fight about the damn coffee table, right? You just have to let it go. So as you're standing in this moment, it's more important to maintain the relationships than to win the stuff. And I know that there are people out there that see it as a garage sale. Like somebody dies and some relative that's, married in or twice removed or a cousin from out of state sees it as a garage sale that they can go shopping in. And all the people that are really close to the person that died are like, that's Mom's stuff! Oh! And then there's all these arguments start. And I just want to say out into the universe about that, it's not about the stuff. It's not worth winning the coffee table if you have to then have a fight or a feud for the next decade about how it went during the funeral. It's not worth it. All that to say, my sister and I, we were able to honor each other and make it be okay. And I know that might not happen everywhere. And so I guess the advice in the contentious situation is ask for what you want and assume you're not going to get it all, and be okay with having something and not getting in a feud. If you're the one that has to be the bigger person to maintain the relationship, be the bigger person and be happier for it. There were other people that came into the house while Alicia and I were there who were sort of going, I like that, could I have that? And Alicia and I both went initially, what are you doing? Back up. And then we would stop and think about it and go, we don't want it. Here, take it. You get down to the end and it's just like a garage sale. You're looking for people to give stuff to, right? You're trying to make things go away. And my sister is working so hard to empty the house now. And do we need to be, equivalent about somebody is coveting my mother's toaster? No, we don't. It was just a really good reminder. It's not about the stuff. Because there's going to be plenty, and somebody is going to be working like a dog to empty the house at some point. And the more, if it can go out, let it go out, and whoever ends up with it, bless them and kiss them and let it go. lesson that I think I've learned again about this is about how I wanted to handle the estate and how my sister wanted to handle the estate. At Christmas time, and when I went back for the funeral in January, I was in the house, and I just wanted to do nothing. Like, I wanted to go home and lick my wounds and cry and let time go by and ignore the house. And I was thinking in my head, let's just ignore the house for a year and I'll come back later and deal with this. And I was saying that to you guys, like, I can't deal with this. Let's just leave it and I'll come back later. The house was, it doesn't have a mortgage. It wasn't a fire drill that we had to empty it. And I was like, awesome, let's leave it. And I was standing with my little sister at one point on that funeral weekend, and she said, oh, we got to get on the house. We got to get the house sold. She started talking about, got to get on the house. And I was like, what? Why? And her response to me was, it felt like a huge burden. The house was this huge to-do list of people to call and things to be hauled off and things to be packaged and things to be done and people to contact. And part of that's because she's the executor and she's local. So the burden is falling to her. But it's also how she thinks and her personality. Like the to-do list about dismantling my mother's house was way more of a burden in her grief than the idea of waiting and coming back to it later. And so I had to accept that my response was to go and go, la, 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 la. I don't want to think about this. I don't want to deal with this. I'll come back later. And her response was, let's get this out of the way so I can stop feeling burdened. And so we compromised. And I came back in May. And the house is selling on the 5th. And I got a few months break. And she had to wait a few months to get started. And it was a good compromise. But we all come to our grief from a different point of view. And if there's 5 siblings, half of them will be going, la, 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 don't talk to me, don't talk to me. And the other half will be like, let's get on it, let's get on it. And that'll feel like each one will be completely irritated by the other one, right? And it will feel like such a source of friction. And you just have to recognize that this is just everybody has their own grief response, and you have to make room for both of them and compromise. Alicia wasn't trying to be irritating. She wasn't trying to get under my skin, even though I was saying to Ed at the time, ugh, shut up! Tell my sister to quit! I was, ugh. But after I thought about it, and after she said to me, it feels like a burden, it was like, oh, I get it. I need to honor that for you, this is a huge drag that you have to deal with, and I get to go home and ignore. And so you have to work in that space and let everybody's grief response be honored, and everybody has to accept that we're not all coming at it from the same point, and everybody's going to have to compromise. Nobody's going to be happy. I would have been perfectly happy to ignore it for a year and come back a year later and then treat it like a job and a project and do it. And she would have been happy if we had started on January 19th, the day after the funeral, and started going through all the stuff. So, we made a compromise in the middle, and it's all getting done. And truthfully, we're still crying through the whole thing. It's not making Alicia cry any less that the house is getting done, and it's not making me cry any less that I'm having to do it early. There's still a project, and you're still compromised, and you still have to get the project done despite being compromised. And so the lesson learned is making space for everybody's grief response and acknowledging that amongst you and making a plan that is a compromise for everybody. Does that make sense? So sorry to make some of you guys cry. Didn't mean to do that. I did have a question on the Meetup board. So I wanted to start with that. She was talking about her elderly aunt who's moving to assisted living and has requested help settling her affairs. So I guess the aunt has said, hi, you're in charge of solving all my problems now. I'm going to assisted living. So I wanted to start out by saying, I did this for another friend of mine a couple years ago, and really, the first thing you have to have is all the legal documents. In order to handle somebody else's affairs, you have to be legally entitled to handle their affairs. So while they're alive, you need a power of attorney, and they need a will, and there's lots of documents about who has access to the person in the hospital. In Texas, there's a document about who has the right to deal with the remains. Like the fact that you're the executor of the will does not give you the right to decide what happens to the body. There's a separate document that says you're authorized to dispose of the body. So there's documents that need to be prepared while the person is of capacity to sign those documents that allow you to conduct business. Like she said, there's real estate to dispose of. Well, in order to do that for the aunt, you're going to have a power of attorney, right, to do the work. And there's a different kind, right? Like there's a standard power, and then there's a power related to real estate.
I don't know about that.
I think there's more than one power, but anyway. Medical power, thank you, yes, that too. So all of those documents require an attorney, and that's step number one for anybody that you're going to assist. You need the legal protection of those documents so that as you conduct business, you know, some other relative can't come and sue you because you sold the family farm and they didn't want you to sell the family farm. Well, that's what the power of attorney is for, right? So that you are doing what you're being asked to do and you're legally protected for having done it. All of those, you know, the medical power and the hospital thing and the regular power of attorney all cease the minute that the person dies, and then you're operating under the will and the how to dispose of the body document and all that stuff. So you have to have two sets, one for while they're living, one for when they're gone, in order to continue conducting business. And all those have to be signed by your relative while they have capacity. So step one, find the attorney, get the documents done. And usually it's not that, you know, you can get sort of a estate packet for several $100s that covers everything and gives you the right to do what you need to do. If you have a whole bunch of relatives that are all arguing about it, yeah, all the more reason to have an attorney. One of my friends is in this position, and she was caring for somebody who she was not related to, who had adoptive children. And the children were not interested in taking care of the person, but my friend was friends with this person and agreed to take care, and then took care of him as he aged, and then went into assisted living, and then had a stroke, and then finally died. And it was a very long, involved process, and she was there every day taking care of him and managing all of his affairs. And in the end, she inherited all the money. He had written the will long ago that she got all the money. As you would expect, the children are objecting, and so she needed all those documents because, you know, they want to argue the point. Like, yeah, he was of capacity when he signed the will. He very exclusively said, yeah, y'all don't get my money, you get $25,000. Go away. And so she was protected by a document, and she's going to need it because they're going to contest it. Make sure you've got all those documents in place. The second thing was, if you're going to take over somebody's bills, you really need an accountant probably to give you some guidance to prepare the tax return, and then having that person do it while the person is living then means that there's somebody to call and handle stuff when the person passes. It makes processing the estate easier if they've been working on the bills or doing the tax return before, for them to step in and do the final tax return. It's an easier thing for them. What else was that? The lawyer, documents, make your business. Oh, one was about the referrals too. If you don't have a lawyer, you might go to the assisted living facility where the person's going to go. They probably have referrals for that kind of stuff all the time. And there's also lots of senior advocate, senior support services agencies that would probably have referral connections for lawyers that do this kind of estate work. Oh, the next person to see is the funeral director. You need to go and let them pre-plan their funeral by the funeral stuff, buy the cemetery stuff. If they have a church and they want to interact with their priest and, you know, plan their service, those are all things that the person needs to do, and interact with the funeral director to do that. I think that that's everything that she asked about. Okay, so who else wants to ask me questions about estate handling? There were a couple of people that said something to me on the Meetup group.
Have you noticed estate handling?
Go ahead.
So much as stuff like pictures, letters, documents. Like I've whittled down so much, but that stuff is still so cumbersome.
So is it your stuff or is it a relative stuff? Like you inherited it?
It's a relative. It's my mother's.
Okay.
And so, but it's so hard to get rid of it. One, because I feel like, well, I'm not really, it's not my place to get rid of it, but she's no longer capable of paying for her own storage. So I've taken that burden on and gotten rid of all the material things that can be donated and stuff like that, or the majority of them. And I'm down to just tons of stuff that I imagine would be meaningful to her, like research and things.
Like genealogy. So you're cleaning out the storage unit, and there's genealogy, research, pictures.
She's a professor, so it's her.
So it's her work research.
It's her work research. So I don't feel like I'm in the place to do it, but at the same time, like I don't even think she would know the difference at this point.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel like I'm just wasting so much money, and she's
with the store. So you're paying for the storage unit.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
And then and pictures.
And what do you do? So I would.
Can you kind of sum up?
Oh yes. So
question for the future,
she is, because she's far away from the microphone.
Yeah.
She is saying that she took over responsibility to pay for the storage unit that had her mother's pictures and other objects and professorial research, her work research in it, and she's trying to whittle it and doesn't know how to get out of the storage unit. Is that a good summation?
Yeah.
Okay. So with the pictures, I would say part of what you're doing is already, I'm guessing you're already doing, like, get rid of the photos that aren't clear, get rid of the photos that don't have people in them. The things that are going to be important for her later, if she starts to be in dementia or in a memory care unit where she needs memory triggers, and she's going to need to look at photographs that are people in her life. And so, oh, this is my dad, this is my mom, that's my kid. This, you know, she's going to need those familiar faces to look at. If she's sharp as a tack, maybe you won't need that. But ultimately, most of everybody's photographs are, 25% people and 75% landscape. There's pictures of buildings or pictures of the river or the boat or the hotel or, but that's not the important part. The important part is the family photos. The faces are what you care about at the end. So I would filter those photos down to a representative sample. Like, you don't need every picture of her dad. You need the 10 best pictures of her dad. You know what I'm saying? Think of a historical sampling of the photographs. You're going to take 10% or 20% that are the best of everybody and pull those out and bless and kiss the rest and let them go. Then it's a size that it'll be in a box and you can bring it in the house, right? The lecture notes, is it from here? Does she live, was she a student, a professor here?
Yeah, she was. And so now she's moved abroad, which is why I have
While you're doing right. So it may be that those notes might be useful to somebody at a university where she worked. But if not, you can ask her how she feels about it.
She'll want to keep it. She's major hoarder.
Major hoarder, okay.
I mean, everything that I got rid of, I pretty much just had to draw the line.
Quietly let it go.
Yeah, take possession over it, throw everything away, and just kind of softly lie to her, saying, I only got rid of the things that were already too bad to keep because it was furniture, everything.
Right.
But really, I just, boom.
So those notes, I think, It's another thing that I would keep a representative sample of. It might be interesting to you later to be able to look through those notes, but you're not going to want to look through 15 boxes. You're going to want to look through, you know, this many. So pulling a representative sample out, maybe there's 47 versions as she worked through drafts, and you find the final one and keep the final one and let everything that came before go out. So you keep the final product. Yes, ma'am.
What was her field? She's a social psychologist. So she is. Yeah.
I would kind of think you wouldn't even need to keep those because that's a field that just keeps on advancing.
Well, exactly. But in terms of its usefulness as research is one thing, but its usefulness as a keepsake is something else. So, yeah.
You could try.
Hold on just a second.
Try a university library.
Yeah, university library might want it, but it'd have to be somebody that had a grant to catalog it. They do that kind of stuff sometimes. Yes, ma'am.
Well, on the side, I remember a nurse who said she always threw away her old pharmaceutical guides when a new one came out because she didn't want to be responsible for passing outdated, perhaps faulty information to everybody.
Oh, there's a point too. That's right. If it's faulty information because it's been superseded by more, you know, evolved research, you don't want to be holding on to stuff that's not current too.
It's more observational, I guess. It's like she's an MD and has a PhD in like indigenous
Yeah.
studies.
Well, so then it's like private stuff, right? Like, is she observing patients? Yeah. So then there's a whole privacy thing. Yeah, I think you may have to shred. If there's a whole lot of stuff about patients or patient records, depending on how much identifying they are, you may need to be careful about that and shred that stuff. So I hear the issue, and what I want to say to you is, it's all going to be a keepsake someday. It may not be right now, but it's all going to be a keepsake someday. And so what you need to aim for is, how much of that are you willing and wanting to have as a keepsake? 10%? 5%? 25%? Whatever feels comfortable to you, whittle the pictures down, whittle the research down, or shred all the research, whatever is comfortable for you. Whittle it down to what you're willing to bring into your house to be part of your keepsake. Because it's going to be yours someday. Pull it down to that level, and then bring it in. What else is in the storage unit?
I've gotten rid of most of the major things, like any furniture, things like that. After that, maybe some other sentimental items of hers. I've only kept what I imagine would be sentimental to her.
That's good.
You know, and not replaceable. And, yeah. But
So at this point, are those things that you can box up and put mom on the outside and bring it in the house and, you know, store it?
I went to a much smaller unit, but I just see it as a complete waste of money.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, so can it come home with you?
I don't know. I mean, I live in an apartment, and already in that first process, even though I got rid of everything, you know, you're like, oh, but this, oh, but that. And before I know it, like, I have all these things, I don't want them, but now they're in my world, and now I'm attached to them. Like, I'm into them.
Well, and you guys all have that experience of you make the first pass and you cut it in half, and then you have to make the second and the third pass, right? Like you have to go back. You got rid of the easy stuff first, and then you're left with the stuff that was harder, and then you have to go back through the harder stuff and whittle it again, and then you have to go through it again until you get down to the concentrated representative sample that is really what you're willing to live with, right? So you just went through test one, and you kept a whole bunch of stuff, and now you're like, ugh, what was I thinking, right? So now it's time to make pass two, and go through and go, yeah, those are cute, but no, and pull some out. Yes, ma'am.
At some point, can that situation, can you ask family and friends?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's not an estate sale, but you know, like maybe they'd like some pictures, or they'd like some mementos.
Are there other relatives? So there's not anybody else, it's you. All you. Okay, well, so then it has to be a representative sample that you're willing to live with. And the thing about pictures is it takes a long time, right? It's just like every other piece of paper. It's a million pieces of paper you have to flip through and go, yes, no, yes, no. But that is the ultimate pass 3 past 12 project, right? You go through and you get rid of all the stuff that's easy and you go back again and you go back again. My roommate did this and I was really proud of her. She did it when, whenever year she moved in with me. Her son got a job in California and she was living with them, and so then she needed someplace to stay. So she moved in with me and she had her parents' photos. And she had 2 big boxes of them, and she went through them once before she moved in with me, and then after she moved in, she went back again 2 or 3 times. And it just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You know, she got rid of everything that was out of focus in landscape and buildings, the Eiffel Tower, right? Everybody has a picture of the Eiffel Tower, they don't need yours, right? And then she got down to, here's all the pictures with people in them, but I don't know half of these people. I don't know who they are. And so all the people that I don't know who they are, out they go, because I can't identify them. They're just strangers to me. So she went back through 3 times before she got it down to a photo keeper box that was, you know, a big one with 12 little keeper boxes inside. And, you know, these are the kids, this is my, you know, mother, this is dad, this is son, this is daughter, this is, you know, this was the vacation trip we made. And so she had some general categories and got it down to 1 box that she has, and that's her photo box. It's going to ultimately go on to her kids, right? Someday. And so you get to do the same. You get to whittle it down to what you're willing to live with. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Who else? You look like you have something to ask.
What is it easy, or what would you wish she could have done to make it easier for you? Things that you can do now to make it easier for someone else.
So I wish that she had gotten through all of the, there was a huge buffet. She has this big buffet piece of furniture. And it was full of things, right? 4 sets of silver, a whole bunch of, no, it didn't all come out, like what? But she had a big piece of furniture, so she used it, and she put stuff in it. So she, and not to discount that she had been through, she inherited a bunch of stuff. She was the only child too. So she inherited from her parents and her uncle, it all came to her, and she'd been whittling it down for 25 years, right? But in the end, there were still a collections of things that she had never talked to us about. She had never shown or had conversations with us and said, this is from Grandma A, this is from Grandma B. Do you like this one? Do you want me to put your name on it? She had never gone through and said, I care about these, I don't care about these. And so, while she did that about a lot of stuff, there were things that we hadn't gotten to yet, that she hadn't, you know, her death was a surprise for everybody. And so she hadn't been able to have those conversations with me about what was important to her. So Alicia and I find ourselves looking at stuff and going, okay, those are glasses. Did she care? Were these her favorites or not? But she was trying real hard to whittle it down, but there were still pockets of stuff that I could tell there were things that came from Chicago. She had inherited them, and she had never had a chance to talk to us about them. The other thing was that my mother played her financial business really close to the chest. And so we kind of found ourselves scrambling a little bit because she had not shared enough information with us to be able to immediately pick up her business. We had to go, you know, go hunting through her paperwork a little. Now we were able to find, you know, here's the bank statements, here's the investment statements, here's the accountant, here's the, you know, we were able to find the trail, but she hadn't coached us about that and shared those details with us. And it would have made it easier for us to not have to go on a sort of a scrambleized hunt. And we didn't know where the will was. There was an original will, and she had taken a will in Texas, and she moved there, and they updated it in North Carolina by adding North Carolina witnesses. So there was a lawyer in town that had the original will. We couldn't find any copy in the house anywhere. And we only found this business card in a business card holder that was a law firm. And we were like, well, let's call that guy. Maybe he knows something. And we just lucked into it. So I think that she was probably in the process of, she wanted to update it, add some charities that were important to her, thank you. And she didn't get that far. And so we didn't have a clue where the will was, and that was a panic-stricken few days. We went and tried to go through every place that she had paper and all her files, and where is it? It would have helped a lot if she had coached us a little bit about some of that stuff. And it was her personality that all that sort of administrative financial business, she was very secretive about it. She did not like sharing that stuff. And so that would have helped. And, you know, you surrender a little bit of your identity and privacy by telling the kids where the will is. It's like you're violating your own sense of privacy by sharing some of that data, but it would have been helpful to have a little bit. Or maybe a list. The will is here, the bank account's here, even if she hadn't talked to us about it, she'd made some kind of list, that would have helped a lot, actually. We were very lucky. I mean, like I said, I didn't find a bunch of unsorted stuff. I didn't open drawers and have them explode. All the closets had been gone through, all the drawers had been gone through, they were all in good shape. And so it was just a matter of, what are we going to do with all the makeup? What are we going to do with the silverware,
And then how do you get rid of things so that you get value out of them? I'm doing my mother's right now.
Are you?
So do
I'm
you
sorry.
do eBay? Do you do estate sale?
Oh, how do
auction?
you make money off of what you're getting rid
Well,
of?
some of it, she was a collector, so some of it is worth money, but I don't have room for all of it. My sister
Right.
doesn't. So how do you get the
So you guys have already
out?
made your choices. You don't want this stuff, but you want to sell it.
Yeah, because my dad's still living.
Right.
But he's moving in with someone, so.
Okay.
it
Well,
needs
so
to
then,
go.
and that's really no different than somebody not related to an estate. It's a trade-off between how much work are you willing to do to get the retail value out of it. And when there's a large collection of stuff, then you want to go for the bulk wholesale solution. So you're not a retail store, and you're not going to set up a retail store, right? So if it is a high dollar value and worth the few hours to put it on eBay or to put it on Craigslist or to, you know what I'm saying? If it's worth, what's our threshold, like $100, $200, if you think it's worth that, it might be worth your time to deal with it. If it's not, if it's a whole bunch of things that are worth $5, then maybe you need to take all of them and go to the resale store and, get what you get out of them. Because it's not worth all the time you're gonna have to spend to get all those little $5 things turned around. You see what I'm saying? So you wanna judge them by how, yeah, they're worth something, but how much? And one of the ways that people do that is they go onto eBay and look at things that have sold. People tend to go and look and list it and see what it's listed for. Well, that doesn't mean nothing. You got to go look in the sales and see what somebody bought it for. And if if it's worth the time and the effort, put it out there and sell it. But you don't want to surrender hours and hours and hours of your life trying to squeeze that dime out of that thing, right?
And you get 30% to eBay.
Yeah. You might as well go to the resale store and hand them 3 boxes of stuff and say, here, and let them write you a check later. It's a trade-off, I mean, if you have all sorts of time to kill and you don't have enough going on in your life and you really think that's fun, go for it. But, that is not me. I have a carload of stuff today that I'm getting ready to go offload to, 3 places, and I'm like, ugh. 3 places, Bulk solution is the way to go. And think about it this way, if somebody finds that one special thing and gets it for real cheap, and they'll just be like, "Whoa, I got a deal on the tchotchke that was, they didn't know what they had and it's worth so much money," and you'll make somebody really happy if they get a good deal on something, right? Yes, ma'am.
My mom recently went to a nursing home and she's got clothes coming out, expensive clothes, stuff that I would not donate. What do you do with that sort of thing, like clothes and shoes, expensive stuff?
Okay, so think about when you go to a retail clothing store, what kind of stuff is in the store?
New.
Right. It's relatively new. It's from that season, right? And so it seems like a bad idea to donate it, but there really isn't a whole lot of market for the object. There may be somebody's brand of shoes. Pull one out of the air. Some fancy shoe brand, some, you know, Hermes scarf. There may be individual pieces that trade as vintage clothing and people collect and buy that kind of stuff, but it's the same kind of thing I was talking about to her. You have this many clothes, this many of them are worth your effort to turn and trade and make money on, and the rest of them are not worth it. No resale store is going to take them, or they're going to take them if they sell vintage clothes, but they're not going to take them if they sell regular current stuff. And every resale shop only accepts in current season. So you have to, right now, they're only going to take summer stuff. They won't take winter deliveries. So you're going to have to hold it for 6 months to take the stuff to the winter store, right?
Are there other places to donate that are better than other places? Like when you donate, I want to go to something good. Are there some places that you can get close to that are better than
What kind of size range are we talking about here?
kind of on the large size,
What's how large?
18 to 20?
So that size is really in demand for lots of women's shelters and like programs for Dress for Success, suit, but they have real tight parameters. Dress for Success is about, can this be worn for an interview? And so they have real tight parameters. But if it falls in those parameters, then they can take it, and they are dying for big stuff, so they would really like it. But there are a few, you know, you can go through women's shelter programs, domestic violence programs, people that are restarting their lives and they've run away from everything and left everything behind. And they need stuff and they would love to have pretty things. Like, that'd be a wonderful thing. So then you just have to be willing to go give it away and let it bless and, you know, prosper someone else. Yes, ma'am.
You know, people often think, well, you know, I could probably sell this and get a few bucks out of it, but also when you donate stuff, you usually get a receipt back that you can thank.
Yeah, which, you know, gives you a donation on the tax return, right?
Yeah.
I know it's hard, and this happens a lot in people's closets. I'm standing in the closet, and here is the coolest thing that's 20 years old. And it was the bomb 20 years ago, and you can still look at it and go, that's so cool, that was so cool. I remember when that was hot, you know, and it's in such good shape, and awesome, and there is no market. There is no, you know, that money is in clothing and shoes, and that is sunk cost the minute you walk out the store. You're never seeing that money again. You may be able to churn a little bit if you give it up 6 months later. I mean, if you buy it at the beginning of the season and sell it at the end of the season, you might get some of your money back. But unless you're churning your clothes immediately, you know, 20 years from now, you're not going to be able to do anything with them. Except go to a vintage store and beg, please take my vintage clothes, right? What else? It's almost time. So I do want to say, on a personal note before we close, I really want to thank everybody for being so kind and reaching out to me and sending their sympathies. I really appreciate that everybody's been sweet to me about this. And I know the meetups so far have been very focused this year on my experience and what's been going on, and so I just want to ask your indulgence. I promise that I'll be on the backside of grief someday, and we'll sort of go back to normal topics. I know that this venue has been darkened a little bit by my experience, and so I just appreciate everybody making space for me to do that. It's really been helpful, and we'll start talking about kitchens soon. All right, thanks everybody.